Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this Blitz chess postmortem, a postmortem of my Blitz game number 542. I had the black pieces. My opponent played e4, and I decided to go with the French defense, e6. So he plays d4, and I go d5, the main moves of the French, and now he chooses the exchange variation. So this is fourth choice in the opening database after knight c3, which is leads to the classical or the win-hour variations, knight d2, the Tarrasch, or e5, the advanced variation. But the exchange variation is kind of a way to avoid a lot of theory. Those are sometimes complicated lines. Still leaves a slight edge to white, but it's thought that black can equalize with good play here. Anyway, knight f3, knight f6. It's all pretty normal moves. But now c3 is a rare move. So there's a couple of interesting tries in the database here. Knight e5, it looks like that's not actually a good move, but it has been tried a number of times, but the results tend to favor black. If this is under 50%, that's something that favors black. So bishop d3, just normal development, is probably the right way to play here for white. Anyway, my opponent played c3, and now I went bishop d6, and we're just out of the book. c5 is an interesting idea. I could play c5 here and get a kind of a position that looks like a Slav defense, but with the colors reversed. But, well, bishop d6 seems like a fine move. And get a position that's about equal. And we stay in this range of around equal for quite a while. It's an interesting game with a little bit of back and forth, but white plays pretty well for a long time. So let's see. I come out and pin his knight. He pins my knight. And h6 to kick the bishop. Drops back. And then knight to d7. So I'm defending my knight against the pin, and that frees up my queen to move. He does the same thing. All logical play. And now I go rook c8. I'm thinking about trying to get some counterplay along the c-file, maybe create some weaknesses, some pawn weaknesses on the queen side that I can attack later. He goes queen c2, setting up this battery with queen and bishop. This is one of those batteries that would be much more effective if you could actually just switch the places of the bishop and the queen. So if the bishop were on c2 and the queen on d3, he'd be threatening checkmate. But as it is, really he's only just threatening a check, so it's not a big deal. And I can ignore that. Also, the knight is guarding that square at the moment, although the knight is pinned. So anyway, c5 to try and create some weaknesses here. He takes. And this leaves me with the isolated queen's pawn, which is kind of a double-edged thing. It gives me a little more space here, but it can be a weakness as a pawn that's not supported by any other pawns, so it has to be supported by pieces, and it can come under attack. But it can also, there are also attacking ideas associated with this pawn, including pushing it forward and busting things up. So he, well, okay, later he blockades it. For now, actually, his next move is kind of a mistake. He gives up this pin, and he gives up the bishop pair for, it seems, no particular reason. Now, it is true that I have to take back with the queen, so I'm no longer guarding the h7 square. But after this exchange, this bishop to h7 check doesn't accomplish anything. So he doesn't even play that. So I'm not entirely sure what his idea was. Maybe it was this blockading idea with knight to d4. But he could have played that anyway, even with the knight still on. So I'm not sure why he gave up that pin. Anyway, this leaves black with a little bit of an advantage, but well, it doesn't persist actually. So I don't play the best way from here on out. I go ahead and grab the other bishop, so I have the bishop pair here. Still keeping an edge. And then I play a6. So maybe that's a bit of a slow move. Well, still keeping a slight edge. He plays h3, kicking my bishop. I drop back to d7. He goes rook f to e1. So he's playing pretty logically here. He's grabbing the open file with his rook. And I want to activate my rooks along the c file. Okay, so rook c7, that was where the advantage swings back. So the engine wants me to play bishop c5 or to counter on the e file. The thing about a move like rook f e8 is sometimes it just leads to a lot of exchanges. Maybe that helps me here, though. Maybe the exchanges help because I'll be left with the bishop pair, which is, in the long run, the bishop pair is quite valuable. It becomes more valuable as positions open up and as you head towards the endgame. So that's a way to play. Maybe a little better than what I did. My idea was still to try and get some action going on the c file here. Goes knight 4 to f3, and I play bishop to c6. He unmasked an attack on my d-pawn. He goes knight b3. Now he's going to bring his knight in to blockade. I play rook to d8. So indirectly adds an extra defender to the d-pawn. There's always this trick of bishop h2 check if there's a loose piece on d5 there. So white has to be careful. But he's not planning to take. He's planning to blockade for the moment. I drop my bishop back to d7. I don't want to give up the bishop pair just yet. And he plays rook a to d1. So pretty logical play from white. He's got his pieces in the center, and he's got the pawn blockaded. So I think a good example of how to play against the isolated queen's pawn. The only move I would question so far is that his exchange on f6 has probably helped me more than it helped him. Okay, so I push on with b5, still with this idea of creating queenside weaknesses. He goes rook d2. And right here I have a little bit of an opportunity that I missed. But I could go ahead and push on with b4. And I get the b4 move in eventually, but right here is a good time, because if he takes, I take back with the bishop, and I've got a skewer on those two rooks that are nicely lined up on the diagonal. So I should have thought of that. Anyway, I played bishop c5, trying to put a little pressure on this knight here. I wasn't quite sure, I guess, what to do. This bishop c5 move just doesn't seem effective. And now if white were to play the move a3, it would permanently shut down this idea of me getting in the b4 move, and then white would be in pretty good shape. Instead, he just keeps maneuvering with his rooks, and gives me the chance to play b4. So this is how I maintain equality. So I kind of gave up an advantage there, and and then he gave it back to me. So it's about even. Okay, after b4, he goes knight to e5, trying to activate his rook, attacking my bishop here. I grab the pawn here. This is going to help to create some weaknesses that I will go after later. He exchanges off one of my bishops. Let's say I take this way, so as to keep the back rank defended. And then he goes in for this check. Actually, this caught me a bit by surprise, because I was expecting that my king had this square to run to, but his queen is guarding that. So actually I only have one move here, and I was lucky this bishop was still on this diagonal, really. But it's enough. One move sometimes is all you need. And it appears there's just no way for him to exploit the pinned bishop. If he could quickly get his queen down here to the back rank somehow and double up on that bishop, it might be a problem. Or if he could bring his knight in somehow to attack that square. But it just doesn't appear to be happening in this case. So let's see. It's after bishop f8, it's his turn. He takes the pawn. It's got to grab that before it becomes dangerous. And I go rook to e7. I want to trade off his rook and relieve the pressure on my bishop. So he has no better move than to exchange out. And now it is really even. The pin has been relieved, and it's just an endgame with a bishop versus a knight. Probably a draw with good play. But his next move is kind of a mistake. His queen comes over here, grabs his pawn, and it is not a simple win of a pawn, because I can get a pawn back, and it kind of removes his queen from the action. So his queen was better over here, and this pawn, which I'm able to win, the c3 pawn, is doing an important job of holding back my d-pawn. This is the typical, this is sort of the pawn skeleton of the isolated queen's pawn position, where you have this c3 pawn holding back the d5 pawn. And it's important to keep that. So he's given that up by grabbing this pawn. Although he also gets an outside pass pawn, which is, in many cases, desirable in an endgame. So if the queens were to disappear, this might be a deciding pawn for white. Let's see. Okay, so his king is in check. He can move, or he can block with the queen. He chose to bring the queen back, probably the best choice. And I grabbed the pawn. And not only have I cleared the way for my pawn to become a queen, I've also destabilized his knight. So that's why it was important to win that pawn. He drops back to b3, and I just start pushing forward. All this is still about even. Let's see. The way for one way for white to hold on to this position is to play queen a1. I didn't spot this idea, but queen a1 kind of forces the trade of queens, because when my queen moves away, his queen and his knight are coordinating with an attack on the d-pawn. So I can either trade queens or I can move my queen away and give up the d-pawn. So queen a1 would be the way for white to equalize. Instead he played queen d1, letting my pawn creep forward one more step. And at this point I should be winning, I think. Although I can't say that, actually. There's one more opportunity that white has to get a kind of a blockade going. Let's see, he plays king f1. Although his king can't really get any closer. My queen and my pawn are guarding the entry squares here. Let's see, I bring my bishop in to, I want to guard the c1 square so his knight can't come here and try and take my pawn. Let's see, he goes g3. And I go forward with queen c2. And this right here is the chance. Let's see, he played queen takes c2, and at that point it really is losing. But he could try to blockade on d2 like this, queen d2. Notice the queen is defended by the knight, similar to that queen a1 move where the knight was defending the queen on a1. So it's interesting. And, I'm not sure how I can make progress here. The chess engine says I should drop my queen back to c4. But that pawn doesn't seem to be going forward at this point. I guess I can use my bishop to harass his queen. Maybe that's the idea. I wasn't entirely sure that black could win this position, but anyway, that would be the toughest way for white to put up a fight. Instead, he traded queens, and now I'm just going to win a piece here because he can't stop this guy from becoming a queen. He brings his king over, and I make a queen, win the knight, and then it's just a win from here on out, so let's just step through the rest of the moves. There's one kind of interesting point towards the end, but the general idea is he can chase my bishop away, he can bring this pawn all the way forward to here, but eventually I'm just going to trade my bishop for that pawn, and his king will be left on a square that's out of play. That's if he tries to queen this pawn, and in the meantime my king will have come up here and gobbled up all of his pawns. So that's the plan, and that's how you win this position. He didn't play it out that way. He went first to the queen side like this, but then he changed his mind and started going back towards the king side. But this still loses. My bishop can blockade his pawn, and I just need to take all his moves away, basically. I push all my pawns forward, and he's left with no moves after a while. And maybe I could have even grabbed that pawn, but it's simpler actually to win this way. So the bishop is firmly blockading his pawn. So this pawn, and then the other pawns are blockaded by my king and my pawns. So at this point, it's white's turn to move, and he has no good move. The bishop is also guarding those two squares where his king might defend the pawn, so his king will have to step away. So that's the other way you win these endgames, is through these kind of Zugzwang positions where you force your opponent to move, and then you're able to gain material. Okay, so he resigned at this point. Thought that was an interesting game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon. Bye.